In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a wooden fingerboard. This is something that is really easy to do at home. It doesn't take any special materials, it's pretty quick, and there aren't a lot of high costs involved. This is also perfect timing right now as we're stuck inside because of the coronavirus pandemic. So I'm hoping that this will be a nice project that you can try out at home and have some fun with. So I'm going to walk through the design, showing you guys some of the newest tools I released. SkateCAD FB, actually that's been out for a couple of years now, but I just released an upgrade to it. And SkateCAD FB mold, which is used for designing the molds for fingerboards. Then I will show you how to press a board using maple veneers, how to drill the holes, shape it, and end with a finished product like this. So the first step is going to be to design your fingerboard. And for that, I'm going to use SkateCAD FB, which is a free tool that's on opensourceboards.com. As you can see here, it shows you a 3D model of a fingerboard. And on the left-hand side, there's this box that has a bunch of parameters, which are features that you can adjust for making your fingerboard. So you can adjust the width of the board, the wheelbase, concave drop. All these terms are explained in this little help button, so you can see exactly what each of these parameters changes and does. The best way to kind of learn this, though, I think, is really just by playing around with them all and seeing how that affects the 3D model of the board that you're making. If you want to speed up this process, you can click on this instant update button and also click on show template only. This is going to just show the profile of the skateboard, which can help you to decide on the actual shape, like the profile. So how round the nose and tail are, how squared they might be, how wide, how long everything is. Once you have that decided, you can then take it off, show template only, and adjust your kick angles, your concave, and the remaining features that are really determined by the shape of the mold. Okay, so now that you have your fingerboard design, the next thing you're going to need is a mold for pressing your fingerboard. You can either purchase a mold from Open Source Skateboards. If you click on the purchase button, it will send your specs and you'll get a 3D printed mold. Or if you have access to a 3D printer or CNC machine, you can use SkateCAD FB Mold, which is the mold design tool. And there's a lot more parameters on that I'm not going to get into right now, but basically you're going to copy all of your design specs from SkateCAD FB and input them into the mold and tweak the mold to have all the additional mold specific features that you'll want. You'll also need a template in addition to your mold. So the mold looks like this. This is a fingerboard mold that was 3D printed. And the template looks something like this. You'll also notice that there are holes in the mold, and this is helpful for drilling your wheelbase. Instead of having to take your board out of the press and then measure out where the center line is, figure out where your holes are going to go, you actually drill your holes while the board is still in the press, right before you take it out. Now we have the veneers. The veneers are laid up similar to a real full-size skateboard in that we have different grains to have strength in both directions, both the longitudinal and latitudinal directions of the skateboard. And we lay them up in an alternating pattern so that we have a vertical grain, then a cross grain, then vertical, cross, and vertical again. So it's 5 plies total. For glue, you can use any wood glue, even Elmer's glue would probably work for this. I'm just using Type Bond 3, which is the same glue I normally use in skateboard decks. And you can just use your finger to actually spread the glue on the veneers because it is a safe glue, it's non-toxic. So you're going to spread glue on each of the veneers and stack them on top of each other evenly. Once they're all stacked, you put them into the press. You put the top mold on top. Make sure you have the nose and tail oriented in the correct directions if you have a distinguishable nose and tail. And then I add a piece of wood to each side before I put clamps on the molds to squeeze down, and the wood basically helps protect the actual mold itself, so the clamps dig into the wood and not the plastic. Crank down the clamps basically as tight as you can get them, and you'll notice the glue will squeeze out. You're going to then you leave the board in the press, glued up, overnight. I recommend leaving it in for at least 24 hours. And that's because the glue that I use recommends that you do not stress the glue joints for 24 hours. And since we are gluing this wood up, we're forcing this wood into a position that isn't a natural, like, flat position. As soon as you release the pressure, the wood's gonna want to spring back. So there is, even though you're not stressing the board, if you take it out and just let it sit, the wood is kind of stressing itself and wanting to spring back during that curing period. Here's the board in the press, and you can see the glue squeeze out. And that little line right there, I didn't mention it earlier, but that was my way of just making sure I had the top and bottom oriented in the correct direction. So I can flip one, so those two are lined up. And then I have the blocks of wood which help prevent the clamps from damaging the mold. So I leave this in the press for 24 hours, but I've already got another deck pressed, so I'm going to show you what to do next with this deck. I forgot to record how to drill your holes with that board, so I'm going to show this quick clip of how to drill your holes once the glue has dried and you haven't yet taken the board out of the press. I use a 1/16 inch diameter drill bit to make the holes. This is the template, and I'm just going to line it up by making sure the holes line up with the holes in this board. And I actually already did this, so you can see this is now lined up. And you're just going to take a pencil and trace the outline like I've already shown here of the template. I'm going to sand this next, but first I'm going to use some cutters to trim away some of this excess so I don't have to sand the whole thing down. You can sand it all down, it's pretty thin so it won't take too long, but trimming that will just make it a little bit shorter. Now that the power sanding is done, I'm going to add a little countersink to these holes on the top side of the board so that the screws sit flush when I put them in. So this is a countersink bit, You can also just use a drill bit that's larger than the 1/16 inch bit. Now that I've got these countersunk, I'm going to use some sandpaper to smooth it all out and get rid of a lot of this messiness. I'm starting with some 150 grit sandpaper, and I'm going to do the whole board with this, and then I'll touch it up with 220 grit after the 150. Now that it's been sanded with 220 grit, I'm going to wipe it down with a wet paper towel to raise the grain before I use the water-based polyurethane to clear coat it. After that, I'm going to lightly sand it with 220, and then I'm going to coat it with 2 coats of polyurethane. The first coat I'm going to apply, I'll wait 2 hours, lightly sand it again with 220 grit sandpaper after that 2 hours, and then give it another coat after that. And then it should be ready to use once that's done. For clear coating, you could probably use a number of different finishes, but I'm going to use what I use on my regular skateboards, which is this water-based polyurethane. And since I have a can of it already, I'm just going to brush it on. This is also available in a spray can, so you can spray it on. And the point of this is just to seal the wood, to protect it from moisture. Put a little too much on my brush, and now I've got to get it out of some of these holes. You definitely want to wear gloves when you are working with this, and you want to be in a well-ventilated area. I put a piece of tape down right here, clear packing tape, so that the board doesn't unintentionally get stuck to the wooden surface that I'm doing this on top of. Once you've waited for this to dry and you've given it a second coat and you've followed the instructions on whatever type of clear coat you're using, you get a finished board that looks something like this. This is one that I made with some, I think it's red gum eucalyptus earlier. This was the first one I made. And that's it. If you need any supplies for making fingerboards at home, please consider purchasing them through opensourceboards.com. Thanks for watching.